Yeah, this rock song of myself, as he calls it somewhere, story of the sentimentalist. Yeah, it's the records of his own life. And it was only just before the accident that I found out he'd been struggling to make a good story out of it. I think his biggest hang-up was figuring out what he could possibly do with all the stuff he'd written down, all the informal stuff. You never know, he might have been the preeminent young journalist of the late 20th century. To him, it was all unpackageable, and you'll get some idea why he felt that way soon. Though you have to admit, the package it's in now seems pretty damn tight. True, the entries are all great, but the order they're in is only the order he happened to think of things. And it seems to me, as smart as he may have been, when it came down to it, he couldn't figure out how to do it alone. He no doubt figured that it's basically impossible to get personal journals published these days, at least without killing a bunch of people first. But that's where I come in. I read some of the journal stuff, and there was absolutely no question in my mind that it's far more than just bullshit personal garbage. Every time he wrote something down, there's no question that it was intended to be read by someone. It's the nature of the written word in the first place. It's on paper so it can be discovered, for better for worse. Anyway, as you'll see, he keeps talking to us. It's all like bits of advice that he wants to give to the world, and that might be where he found his main problem. He knew that people are not often keen on being lectured. He knew that angry lecturing doesn't sell very well either. However, gentle, sappy lecturing does, which explains the Herman America advice book, which you'll hear more about soon. So that's where I come in. To this day, he knows that I know him better than anyone else on the planet. He knows he talked to me over the years more than anyone else. And finally, he knows I fucking hate him sometimes, but that of course I'm also a huge, huge fan. I was always there. I'm the other guy he talks about most of the time. I'm the guy he grew up with. I'm the guy who knows how smooth he is. And I'm the guy that knows how athletic and graceful he was. Not to mention what a butthead he could be. I'm the guy he played Cowboys and Indians with. And I'm the guy who was always there to catch him when he fell. It's just that he never did. So when he came to me and told me he wanted to write his own autobiography, naturally the first thing I told him was, "You're an asshole?" Which, incidentally, I've told him 100 times, knowing full well that he is far from it, at least far from the bad kind of asshole. Anyway, I ran with this request for a ways, and I wrote a pretty substantial introduction to his life story. The first introduction with a capital I. Even though it comes second now, which you can read if you want to, but you don't have to. It's nothing less than a total rant, a borderline tirade, really, full of all my raving love-hate feelings for him. I was fuming mad when he told me he was going to write his life story at 21 years of age. So naturally, I went off on him. But if you read it, you'll see that I was struggling with how pissed I was. I had suspicions at the time that he wasn't going to do any good if I simply went apeshit on him. I had suspicions at the time that it wasn't going to do any good if I simply went apeshit on him. I had faith that he probably had a lot to say, but I still didn't think it was right for me to totally ignore how much he'd pissed me off over the years. When it came down to it, I knew I was just being honest, and that I had a unique and probably important perspective, even though I knew I sounded like an asshole trying to make him sound like an asshole. And that's why I left it in, because it's just about the most honest thing I've ever written. It's full of contradictions and backtalk, and shows that I was obviously a bit confused and disorganized when I wrote it, but at least it is what it is. Herman liked it because he said it was so raw that nobody could claim that I didn't truly mean what I was saying, which is probably quite true. And he talks about that whole ridiculous, and he talks about that whole ridiculous deconstructionist, revisionist history thing. He says he loves my tirade because it negates the need for deconstruction, man, because of its honesty. I was not a goddamn college English major, so whatever. Herman, I'm going to read that again. And he talks about that whole ridiculous deconstructionist, revisionist history thing. He says he loves my tirade because it negates the need for deconstruction, dude, because of its honesty. I was not a goddamn college English major, so whatever, Herman. I told him I'd use the tirade if he really thought it contributed something. He loved the first introduction because he knew all along what it was going to sound like. And he hasn't actually said this to my face yet, but I know he thinks that my introductions will be what sells the book, if it sells at all, that is. Because they do something to balance him out. Translation, he knows how good his stuff is going to sound next to mine. I'm probably making the journal shine already, and you haven't even read half the dumb things I'm going to end up saying. Keep this in mind. I relinquish all my power from here on in to give you the go-ahead to just skip everything I'm going to run on about. Because truly, the only reason I'm doing this is so you build up an interest in the stuff that comes later. If somehow you're already interested, if you've already gotten a taste for how uninspirational this can be, then just skip ahead to the journals. He's waiting for you back there, and I know whether he's dead or alive right now, he's probably a little impatient. However, this me stuff was his idea, so for that reason alone, we know it can't be completely worthless. If you have the time, you might as well read my flailing first introduction, just for the balance Herman wanted. It's not just that my story makes his look so much better. It's more about the fact that I know him so well, and I know I told some stories about him that he never told himself, and probably never would. I promise you, by the time you've read some of the old journal entries, you'll see what I'm talking about. He just doesn't always seem human like the rest of us. I submit as evidence of his superhero's nickname, Herman America, yes, as in Captain. I'll explain that more later. If it hadn't been for Herman, I'm positive I never would have thought of half the stuff I've thought of, and I probably wouldn't talk as much either. In a way, and today I don't mind admitting this, primarily because I now understand that overall he's been a positive force in my life, Herman made me. And I've never told him I admit this, but it probably isn't much of a mystery to him. He could always tell when I was listening, even when I made it look like I didn't give a shit about a damn thing he had to say. And that, if nothing else, should explain why he felt comfortable having me write the introduction to his otherwise highly precocious journals. He figured out pretty quickly that even though he was pissing me off, eventually I appreciated everything he was doing for me. Now he figures that if I just explain that he really means well, that he can be as likable as he is hateable, then maybe people will read the whole enchilada without getting too offended or bored. If and when he strikes a nerve, which he almost definitely will. So, before I let you read all the other things I wrote to introduce him in his journals, let me again say that you have every right to just skip me and move on to the good stuff. I won't be offended because I know I would skip me too. I won't be offended because I know I would probably skip me too, if given the choice. Anyway, for now, let me bid you farewell. Have fun and good luck. Yes, if you're anything like me, his stuff is sure to make you a little crazy at times. But I really didn't turn out all that bad, so don't let yourself hate him any more than you have to. The reason I'm doing this, really, is to help readers avoid the shock of being exposed to Herman without any warning. I'm still pretty bad-tempered and definitely still in the dark about a few things, but not nearly as much as I used to be. The fact is, his honesty is pretty addictive, and frankly, when it comes down to it, I relate pretty closely to the life he lived, to the life he's living. Well, enough of this for now. Yes, you can read more of my impressions of Herman if you want to, but let this be the formal closing of my real introduction. First of all, I think I mentioned this already, but this friend of mine, Herman, was only 20 when he started all this. Put that in your pipe and smoke it. Let me ask you, how did Herman get to be 100 years old in only 20 years? Where did he actually come up with all this stuff he came up with? That's the last answer that's the last answer I'm looking for from him. And that's the answer I know I'll never get. That's what he'll keep for himself. That's what he'll keep for himself. You know, the true source of inspiration and creation and all that. He knows about it a little. He knows about it a little. But as groovy and sweet and honest as he makes it sound, it still doesn't make it much clearer to me. So finally, I guess the real reason I'm doing this is to help Herman's journals reach a wider audience. Balance may be all they need. So here's a little balance. Maybe now it could be called a men's thing, or a men's book for the new millennium, or something. Maybe all those fans of that Robert Bly guy might decide now to have a look. Maybe Herman will prove once and for all that young people occasionally have something valuable to say. Maybe Herman can single-handedly defeat the notion that everyone our age is nothing but an MTV-weaned illiterate. Maybe Herman can single-handedly defeat the notion that everyone our age is nothing but an MTV-weaned illiterate. Maybe this men together stuff will work to get the young prodigy heard. Maybe everyone will get excited. Maybe everyone will get all excited, like, ooh, look, introspective men bearing their souls. Or maybe, ooh, look, these guys are doing more than just banging on drums in the woods to get in touch with themselves. Hey, look, they're talking things through. They're actually communicating and trying to deal with some of the challenging stuff that most men don't tend to want to talk about. Maybe people will say it's wonderful that Herman is so honest. And isn't it sweet isn't it sweet what he's done for his poor friend David? Look what he's done to get the people around him to open up a little more. Look how humble he is. Look how humble he is. Look how thoughtful and honest he is. Oh, gee whiz.